Let's talk about white supremacy and what happened last night for a moment, because when you were talking to reporters last night, you called white supremacy a myth. When someone asked you about Dylan Roof, you said you didn't know who that is. Have you looked up what happened in 2015?
Yeah, look, I said this last night. Invidious racial discrimination is wrong no matter how it happens. But if a Washington Post reporter is asking me almost like a catechism, whatever question I said, I'm against invidious racial discrimination, whatever form it takes, but says, do you denounce white supremacy? It's incumbent on us for us to define what white supremacy is. I wrote my book, Woke Inc., and I've written about the detailed understanding of what the popular understanding of these terms have come to mean. Do you believe punctuality is a vestige of white supremacy, Dasha?
Look.
Don't you find it interesting how the woke media loves to get you on these gotcha questions? And in this interview with NBC, Vivek Ramaswamy, who's running for president of the United States, this interview is a classic example of a leftist, socialist, woke media hack trying to get him on a gotcha question. And this is a follow-up to a town hall that he did the prior day. I'm not going to show you, but I'll leave a link in the description below. But by and large, he was asked a gotcha question about white supremacy. And he said, look, I'm not going to get caught up in your catechism. I'm not going to get caught playing your games of word and semantics. And he just rips this woman a new one. It is fantastic. I've been doing politics for over 20 years at state level, national level, all over the place. And I understand what's going on during election cycles and what they try to do to try to detract from candidates and especially Republicans to get them on something that they can soundbite and say, see, I told you he's a racist. So let's watch this interview. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm going to interject some clips here and there to kind of support what I'm trying to say, but I'm going to by and large sit back and just watch you see it. And I'm going to show you how good Vivek is at this. Now, by the way, he's probably not going to get the nomination. I'm supporting Trump 2024. However, he is speaking the MAGA language big time, and I just love what he has to say and how he's able to say it and his skill at navigating these woke questions and narratives. And I'm going to point out some subtleties, how deceitful the left really is. Let's go.
Let's talk about white supremacy and what happened last night for a moment, because when you were talking to reporters last night, you called white supremacy a myth. When someone asked you about Dylan Roof, you said you didn't know who that is. Have you looked up what happened in 2015?
Yeah, look, I said this last night. Invidious racial discrimination is wrong no matter how it happens. But if a Washington Post reporter is asking me almost like a catechism, whatever.
And by the way, it was a Washington Post reporter. And let me also say, she kicked in there with the lead talking about how he said white supremacy is a myth simply to put him on the defensive and to paint him as a racist right off the bat.
Question I said, I'm against invidious racial discrimination, whatever form it takes, but says, do you denounce white supremacy? It's incumbent on us for us to define what white supremacy is. I wrote my book, Woke Inc., and I've written about the detailed understanding of what the popular understanding of these terms have come to mean. Do you believe punctuality is a vestige of white supremacy, Dasha?
Look,
because if you don't, then you have a disagreement about many of the people who are defining those terms.
Being on time is white supremacy, because what are they always on time to do? Oppress. I'm always going to be 10 to 15 minutes late because that's the correct time, according to my people.
Or the written word, or the use, or the nuclear family. These aren't my words. These are the words of intellectual proponents from Ibram Kendi to the Ayanna Presleys to BLM that have said these are vestiges of white supremacy. So,
Mr. Ramaswamy,
getting her to define the term as to what white supremacy is. In a video we did last week, we talked about how the left loves to weaponize language. And so they have their term for it. Reality has its own definition of it, but they change that to make it seem like you are not caring because you are actually against that particular word phrase. So what Vivek does very brilliantly is here, and what I recommend people do when I tell them how to debate leftists, is to define the terms that you're talking about, because the left loves to weaponize language. They'll say Planned Parenthood. I mean, who's against planning a parenthood? However, what they really mean is, exterminating a pregnancy. That's what they mean. So if you're against Planned Parenthood, it means you're against families, but that's not the real thing. BLM, Black Lives Matter. Why wouldn't anyone be against blacks and their lives and that mattering? Well, it really means to them a socialist communist organization hell-bent on destroying Western civilization. That's what the reality is. And what Vivek does, and why he says, I'm not going to get caught up in your word games, in your catechisms, is because we have to define the terms. He does a brilliant job setting the tone right there and putting her on the defensive.
Have it both ways.
What you do, though.
We have to have
You
an
choose-
honest discussion.
Straw man arguments.
This is not a straw man.
You
This is
brought
not
up
a straw
Jussie
man.
Smollett as the best
Jussie
example
Smollett
of white
was the hottest thing in
supremacy.
news in the back of a fake actual attack on him that we have to contend with. This is actually,
yet you have
look at the
examples like the
federal law
Buffalo
enforcement's
shooter
data.
in New York just in
Cherry-picked.
2022.
You have other
but
examples.
you are also cherry picking when you bring up Jussie
So
Smollett.
I'll look at all of the statistics. More black on black
Absolutely.
crime. If you really care about actual crime against black Americans, let's get to the root causes of it in the inner cities of this country.
The Anti-Defamation League tracked at 38%.
So this here is where the left really gets sinister and nasty and nuanced, and we have to really be careful when you talk to these people. Now, Vivek is absolutely on point here. And what Vivek has done and what he's doing right now is a term we call in politics. It's called a political box. He is staying in his political box. And let me tell you what that box is. His box is this. I am going to stick to the notion that I want to tell the whole truth regardless of where it's coming from, both sides, and not cherry pick any of it. I'm going to talk about the stuff that gets reported and the stuff that gets not reported and let people make the determination as to what the truth is. Now, what they do is, and what's sinister about what she did, is she calls him out being a straw man, which is totally not true. She's just making some words up. What he's doing is not a straw man. What she's doing in reality is cherry picking and trying to get him to say that the thing that's being omitted from the news is okay, but the cherry picked items that they actually want you to identify as the by and large reality that's happening all the time, but they will omit the things that go against their narrative. And he is slick to that, and he's telling her that about BLM and about, as we'll say a little bit later here in this interview, another thing that I won't mention quite yet, but I'll let him tell you about how things get left out of the media. And you'll see later how the reporter has nothing to say because she's gone through all of her talking points. And at that point in time, once she knew where he was going with his argument, once she knew where he was going to stay in terms of his political box, so to speak, that she had nothing on him because he calls her out on the various talking points. And once you get past their first talking point, they have nothing left. And that's typical for liberals.
So I'll look at all of the statistics. More black on black crime. If you really care about actual crime against black Americans, let's get to the root causes of it in the inner cities of this country.
The Anti-Defamation League tracked a 38% increase in white supremacist propaganda last year.
Who's tracking that?
The Anti-Defamation League.
Yeah, the ADL, I don't think is a particularly credible source when they have a cherry-picked information.
When we're talking about
the ADL is absolutely not an organization that you can reference in an argument like this, because the ADL, they are a woke organization, as woke as they get. So he called her out on that and basically discredited her reference there.
I would suggest look at there's a table, 2x2 table, a federal law enforcement data, which you could say what you do. Maybe we shouldn't believe that either. But look at black on Asian crime, black on black crime,
the
white on
FBI
black
hate crime
crime.
statistics. That's a law enforcement agency.
So let me tell you what she just did there. When he said the crime data, her next talking point was to bring up the FBI hate crime data to counteract actual data of actual crime. That's how they are so deceitful and how they are so cunning. But he caught her on this too, because hate crime is totally perspective. It's relative. It is subjective. It is not absolute truth. What is absolute truth is this black person did this to this black person. That is concrete. That's matter of fact. What's not true or matter of fact is this person did this to this person for this reason, because he was thinking this way, because he has this worldview. But that is subjective. It is not objective. And he called her out on that. And at this point in time, she is running out of things to go with. She is totally done for the most part. And he's going to have the rest of this interview pretty much unfettered.
59.1% was based on race, ethnicity, and ancestry, saying hate crimes rose 12% between 2020 and 2021.
Look at the absolute crimes themselves. What they classify as a hate crime is itself a political judgment. I think that when you actually care about protecting life, if you want to say Black Lives Matter, let's look at where Black lives are actually being lost. It's in the cities, at the heart of other black Americans and criminals
that's
that are
absolutely
restrained by
an
the
issue that we
absence
talk
of
about as well. But are we
and
supposed to ignore white supremacist hate crimes?
We're not supposed to ignore any kind of crime, Dasha. That's what I say. But what I see is a selective reporting. Take the Nashville Transgender Shooter Manifesto. Every shooter manifesto in a mass shooting has been released within 48 hours, except for that one shooter in Nashville. Now, it ended up being leaked. What do you see? It wasn't a white supremacist. It was somebody that was actually making fun of using derogatory terms. I believe.
Okay, so why are you okay talking about that manifesto and not talking about the manifesto from the 2015?
I'm more than okay talking about both. But what I'm asking is, why is the mainstream media suppress that one? Why?
He said he's talking about both, and she can't deal with that. She can't deal with that aspect.
Did the police suppress that one? Why was that the one shooter manifesto that of all of the mass shootings, every other shooter manifesto has been released? I'm focused on that one because that's the one that's been hidden from us. And it comes back to the point of my candidacy and the way I'm going to run this country. Trust the people with the truth. If it doesn't match your narrative,
the reality is right now,
I think the media did not hold the police accountable. They would have been demanding that.
Starting to gain traction with the black community, with Latino voters. Do not worry that your rhetoric is pushing them away. There are folks
to the contrary. I think we're going to bring black people into this movement
who are concerned about your rhetoric.
Well, you know what? I'm concerned about their corruption. If you had somebody who actually one of the most prominent black influencer the other day, what did she say? I've been black my whole life, and this man could actually unify this country, in response to a long exchange I had with a black pastor who had an event here in Iowa, did challenge me with a hard question, asking me, are my views against affirmative action, how do those align with historical racial injustice?
Affirmative action is a debate that is being had.
If I may just finish this. If I may finish my point,
Dasha.
With racism, I think I will be better positioned.
But you're denying that racism is a problem.
I've never denied that racism is a problem. And if you listen to the response I gave to that black pastor, my whole point is racism has been a major problem for most of our national history.
From here on out, she has nothing to say. She's done. She's trying her best to have some sort of intelligent thought come out of her mouth, but she just can't do it. So at this point in time, she just gives up.
But we're getting close to the promised land that Martin Luther King envisioned. We're as darn close to it as we ever have been. And so what bothers the heck out of me is it's right when we're close to that promised land. Martin Luther King said it, I may not get there with you, and he didn't get there with us. But I think it desecrates the legacy of our civil rights movement, desecrates the legacy of Martin Luther King, that right when we get closest to the point of having racial equality and gender equality and even opportunities for people of minorities of many types, are we perfect? No. But are we as close as we've ever been? Yes, we have. To then obsess over systemic racism, to then obsess over white guilt and otherwise, we're creating new waves of racism, Dasha, that we otherwise would have avoided right when we're closest to having achieved what even the proponents of the civil rights movement would have dreamed of. That's what bothers me.
Now, what's interesting is her last bit of argument was to say, isn't your rhetoric causing more racism? And what Vivek does here, I'm not sure if he does this intellectually, or he just lucked into this particular position, or did he actually think about this ahead of time? If he did, it's absolutely brilliant. I'm not taking anything away from him if he did luck into this particular situation. But the fact that he spun it around on her and accused her of what she accused him, or at least asked him of, but doing it in a way that's actually framed using MLK, whom the left claims to love, was absolutely remarkable.
My exchange with that black pastor about a week or so ago, right here in Iowa, not far from where we are, it was in Indianola, not far from where we are in Des Moines, was that we're founded on the pursuit of a more perfect union, the pursuit of liberty, equality, and justice for all. And I reject this left-wing narrative that's creating more artificial division. So I believe I will bring more black and Hispanic voters into our movement, not by saying fake poll-tested slogans, but by speaking the hard truth that we've been imperfect in our past, but let us celebrate the progress we've made and reject the media's cherry-picking narratives to actually get to the truth of the matter. And now if we care about black lives, the things we're going to do isn't obsessing about white supremacy. It's actually fixing the problems in our cities, which I will do as our president.
Okay, that was one of the best interviews I've seen in a very, very long time. And he does a fabulous job. When I was a campaign manager of a candidate here where I live, we were at the North Carolina A&T parade. And if you know anything about North Carolina A&T, it's a HBCU university, and their homecoming is huge. And so we were on this parade, and the candidate that was with me was white, and we're going through this all-black parade. And this is like in this is probably 2007, somewhere in there. and they were saying, hey, and they were talking to the candidate saying, hey, Jim, are you gonna be back even though it's not election year next year? So basically what they're saying is, we like you, but are you gonna be back when it's not an election year? And so the point is that the black community, by and large, wants authenticity. And that's what Vivek was saying there at the end there. So what are your thoughts about this interview with Vivek? I thought it was amazing. Please comment below. I'd be interested to know what you think. And if you want to see a list of things that the left considers racist, we've made that video and you can see it right here.